Imagine standing in your own kitchen, holding a cold cup of coffee, and watching the person who raised you walk out the front door with a suitcase and a look of pure, cold indifference because she just traded her family for a slip of paper worth $80 million. My mother didn't just leave. She erased us like we were a mistake she finally had the money to fix, looking me dead in the eye and saying that we were the anchors dragging her down, and she was finally ready to sail. How do you even process the fact that your own mother's love had a price tag, and apparently, it was exactly one jackpot away from expiring? I'm sitting here in an empty house that smells like her perfume and betrayal, wondering if I ever actually knew the woman who tucked me into bed, or if she was just playing a part until she could afford a better script. Was I wrong for screaming that I hoped the money burned a hole through her soul? Or would you have reacted the same way if your world collapsed because of a lucky numbers draw? Tell me, is there any amount of money that would make you turn your back on your own flesh and blood? Or is my mother just a special kind of monster that I unfortunately share DNA with? To understand how we got to this point, you have to understand who we were before the ticket. We weren't rich, but we weren't starving either. We were that classic middle-class family where my dad worked overtime at the logistics firm, and my mom worked part-time at a local library. Growing up, I thought we were solid. My dad is the kind of man who wears the same pair of boots for 5 years, so he can make sure I have the best soccer cleats or the newest laptop for school. He is the guy who spends his Saturdays fixing the neighbor's lawnmower for free and his Sundays making sure the gutters are clean, and the family car is safe for me to drive. He grew up in a house where you fix things instead of throwing them away, a philosophy he applied to his tools, his cars, and unfortunately, his marriage. My mom, or the woman I thought was my mom, was always the one organizing the bake sales and the neighborhood watch meetings. She seemed content, or maybe she was just a world-class actress performing for an audience of two. Looking back now, there were signs I missed, little sighs when she looked at the peeling wallpaper in the hallway, or the way she'd linger just a second too long on travel commercials showing private villas in the Maldives. I remember her sitting by the window on rainy afternoons, staring at the suburban street like it was a prison yard. I remember one specific time we were at the mall, and she stood in front of a high-end jewelry store for nearly 10 minutes, just staring at a diamond necklace that cost more than our house. When I asked her if she liked it, she didn't say it was pretty. She said, "It's a shame that some people are born into that while others have to rot in a cubicle." She used to joke that one day she'd be set for life, and we'd all laugh, thinking she meant through hard work or a modest inheritance from a distant aunt. We never realized she was literally praying to the gods of chance to give her an exit ramp away from us. The Tuesday it happened started like any other day. The sky was that dull, overcast gray, and the toaster was acting up again, smelling like burnt crumbs and regret. My dad was rushing out the door, kissing her on the cheek, telling her he'd be late because of the end-of-month audit. He even promised to pick up her favorite takeout on the way home to celebrate, making it through another Monday. I was heading to my college classes, complaining about a midterm I hadn't studied enough for, rambling about how I just wanted a quiet life one day. Mom was sitting at the small wooden table, scratching off a series of lottery tickets she'd bought at the gas station while picking up milk. She did this every Tuesday. It was her little ritual, her 5 minutes of fantasy before she had to go stack books at the library. Usually she'd win $5, maybe 10, and use it to buy more tickets or a fancy coffee. But that morning she went silent. I mean, a silence so heavy it felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. I asked her if she was okay, and she didn't look at me. She just gripped the edge of the table until her knuckles turned white, her eyes fixed on that tiny silver-scratched square like she was staring into the center of the sun. She didn't scream, she didn't jump for joy. She just stood up, tucked the ticket into her bra, and walked into her bedroom without saying a single word to me. I thought she was sick, maybe a sudden migraine or some bad news she'd read on her phone. I knocked on the door and she just yelled, "Go to school, Sarah, I'm fine. Just leave me alone." For the next 3 days, she was a ghost. She stopped going to the library, stopped cooking dinner, and barely spoke to my father. Dad was worried sick, thinking the stress of her sister's recent illness was finally getting to her, or maybe early onset something. He tried to take her out to dinner, tried to buy her flowers, but she just looked at him with this terrifyingly blank expression. It wasn't sadness. It was a total lack of connection, like she was looking at a stranger who was talking too much. We didn't know she was spending those days at a high-end law firm and a financial advisor's office in the city, setting up a private trust and making sure her name was the only one on the payout. She was meticulously calculating the cost of her freedom, and apparently, the price was us. She waited until the money cleared, until the wire transfer hit an account my father didn't even know existed. We found out on a Friday evening. My dad had just come home, exhausted, his shirt wrinkled and his eyes tired, and he sat down expecting the usual. "How was your day?" Instead, there was a legal envelope on the table and 3 suitcases lined up by the door, expensive leather ones I'd never seen before. She came out of the bedroom dressed in a designer suit I'd never seen before, something that probably cost more than my dad's car. She looked like a stranger, like a villain from a movie who had finally achieved her master plan. My dad laughed nervously, asking if we were going on a surprise vacation. She didn't laugh back. She told us, in a voice as flat as a dial tone, that she had won the mega jackpot. $80 million after taxes. My dad's face lit up for a split second. That glimmer of hope that all our struggles were over. That he could finally retire. That we could help people. He even started talking about paying off the neighbor's mortgage because that's the kind of man he is. But then she kept talking. She said she had realized during those 3 days of silence that she didn't want to waste her new life maintaining a life she never really liked. She said she was tired of being a wife, tired of being a mother, and tired of the mediocrity of our existence. She told my father she had already filed for divorce, and that since the ticket was bought with her personal allowance and moved into a pre-established trust, she had been advised he wouldn't see a dime of it. I stood there, feeling like I had been slapped. I asked her, "What about me? What about my tuition? What about our family?" And she looked at me. This is the part that haunts me. She looked at me like I was a telemarketer trying to sell her something she didn't need. She said, "You're 20 years old, Sarah. You're an adult. Your father can handle you. I've given you 20 years of my life, and I think I've paid my dues. I want to see the world without being asked what's for dinner, or why the laundry isn't done." My dad started crying. Not loud, sobbing cries, but those quiet, broken sounds of a man whose heart is literally cracking open. He begged her, not for the money, but for the 25 years they'd spent together. He asked her if those years meant nothing, if the anniversaries and the birthdays and the hospital visits were just a transaction. She just picked up her bags, told us the house was in his name and he could keep the shack, and walked out to a black car that was waiting for her at the curb. She didn't even look back at the window. So that is the reality I am living in right now. My father is a shell of a man, sitting in his chair staring at a wall, and my mother is somewhere in Europe or the Caribbean, spending millions of dollars while her daughter struggles to figure out how to pay for next semester, and her husband contemplates a life of debt and loneliness. I had to watch the woman who taught me how to walk away from me because she got lucky. Before I tell you about the absolute chaos that happened when she tried to come back and how we handled the revenge part of this story, I want you to pause right here. Go to the comments and tell me, is there ever a justification for this? If you won that kind of money, would you stay with your family? Or is there a secret part of you that understands why she ran? What would you have done in my shoes in that kitchen? The aftermath was a nightmare. Word got out, as it always does in small towns. People didn't just hear she won the lottery, they heard she abandoned us. My dad was humiliated. He had to go to work and face the pitying looks of his colleagues while knowing his wife was probably on a yacht somewhere, drinking champagne with people who didn't know his name. We struggled. My dad's health took a turn for the worse from the stress, and I had to take a semester off and work 2 jobs, one at a diner and one at a warehouse, just to keep the mortgage paid, because even though she left us the house, she didn't leave us the money to maintain it. The taxes alone were a mountain we couldn't climb. We spent our nights looking at the empty side of the bed and the empty chair at the table, the silence in the house echoing her parting words. For 6 months, we heard nothing. No texts, no happy birthday to me, nothing. We saw pictures on social media occasionally, posted by people who followed her new life accounts. She was draped in diamonds, standing next to people who looked like they were carved out of plastic, smiling a smile I didn't recognize. She looked younger, more vibrant, and utterly detached from the wreckage she left behind. She was visiting the Eiffel Tower, while my dad was visiting the cardiologist. She was eating at Michelin-star restaurants while we were splitting a box of generic mac and cheese. She was living in a world of gold while we were buried in the gray. But then the luck started to turn. Just not the way she expected. See, my mother was smart enough to hide the money from my dad, but she wasn't smart enough to hide it from the vultures that circle that kind of wealth. The irony was sickening. She thought she could buy her way back into our hearts with the scraps of the fortune she used to buy her way out. She spoke about the money like it was a peace offering, as if the last 8 months of hell could be erased with a check. My dad, God bless him, looked at her for a long time. I could see the conflict in his eyes. This was his wife, the mother of his child. I saw the flash of the man who still loved the ghost of who she used to be. The man who remembered her holding me as a baby. But then he looked at me. He looked at my tired eyes from working double shifts, the calluses on my hands, and he looked at his own trembling hands that struggled to hold a pen because of the stroke he'd had shortly after she left. He remembered the nights he spent wondering if he was mediocre. The nights he spent questioning his worth because the woman he loved traded him for a ticket. He stood up, walked to the door, and locked it from the outside. He told her, "You told us we were the anchors dragging you down, Brenda. You told us you paid your dues. Well, we've paid ours too. We paid them in the tears and the shifts, and the shame you left us with. You didn't want a family, you wanted a ticket. You got it. Now go use whatever you have left to buy yourself a life, because you don't have one here anymore. We aren't your safety net. We're the people you threw away." I didn't say anything. I just watched her through the screen door. She begged me, "Sarah, please, I'm your mother." And I told her, "My mother died the day she bought that ticket. You're just a stranger who looks like her, and frankly, you're not very good at the role." She stood on that porch for an hour, crying and pounding on the door, but we just turned off the porch light and sat in the dark. We watched the cab drive away, its taillights fading into the night, and for the first time in months, the house felt light. It didn't feel empty anymore. It felt clean. About 8 months in, we got a phone call. It wasn't from her, but from a hospital in Florida. Apparently, the charming younger man she'd been traveling with, a count, or some such nonsense, hadn't just been interested in her personality. He had slowly been draining the trust through a series of investments she'd signed off on because she was desperate to fit into his world. He convinced her that they needed to buy property in Dubai, crypto assets that didn't exist, and a private jet share that turned out to be a scam. When the money started to dip and she started asking questions, he didn't just leave. He cleaned out the remaining accessible accounts and vanished, leaving her with a massive hotel bill she couldn't pay and a nervous breakdown that landed her in a psych ward. She was alone, broke, and the very people she tried to impress were the ones who laughed at her behind her back. The villas she dreamed of were replaced by a sterile hospital room where nobody knew her name or cared about her contributions to society. One evening, there was a knock at our door. It wasn't the black car this time. It was a yellow cab, and the engine was rattling, puffing out smoke that smelled like cheap oil. My mother stepped out, but she didn't look like the woman in the suit anymore. She looked older, haggard, her expensive clothes stained and wrinkled like they'd been slept in. She walked up to the porch where my dad and I were sitting. She started crying, telling us how sorry she was, how she had been tricked, how she realized that we were the only ones who truly loved her for her and not her bank account. She actually had the nerve to ask if she could come inside and start over. She told us she still had a little bit of money left, maybe 100,000, and she wanted to use it to fix our lives. We ended up selling the house, moving to a smaller place closer to my school, and starting over on our own terms. We don't have $80 million, but we have a home where nobody is looking for an exit. We found out later she moved in with her sister, the same one she ignored while she was rich, and she's back to working a part-time job, probably still buying those Tuesday tickets, hoping for a second chance to run away. But she'll never have a second chance with us. That's the story of how my family was dismantled by a winning ticket and rebuilt by the people who stayed. It taught me that money doesn't change people, it just unmasks them. It shows you exactly who they were all along when they no longer have a reason to pretend. I lost a mother, But I gained a level of respect for my father and myself that no jackpot could ever buy. My father is smiling again, his health is improving, and we've learned that wealth isn't about what's in your bank account, but who is standing next to you when the account is empty. If you are on my side and think we did the right thing by turning her away, please hit that like button. It really helps me know I'm not alone in this. Subscribe to the channel if you want to hear more stories of betrayal, revenge, and real life. And please share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section. Would you have let her back in for the 100,000? Or is peace of mind worth more than any payout? I'll see you all in the next story.